Not every war begins with the sound of drums. Some wars begin with silence. In the autumn of 1274, on the narrow sands of Komoda Beach on Tsushima Island, 80 samurai stood facing the sea. There were no banners behind them, no reserves waiting beyond the dunes. Just 80 men, their armor creaking softly in the wind, staring at a darkening horizon. Across that horizon was not a storm. It was an empire. More than 20,000 Mongol warriors were advancing toward the shore, carried by hundreds of ships, their sails blotting out the light like a moving shadow. For the men standing on Komoda Beach, there was no illusion of victory. They knew the numbers. They understood the odds, and yet none of them stepped back. This is not a story about triumph. This is a story about the moment when honor collided with extinction. 7 years earlier, in 1267, a letter crossed the sea from the Asian mainland to Japan. It did not arrive with fire or steel. It arrived with ink and paper. The sender was Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, ruler of the Yuan dynasty, supreme authority over the greatest land empire the world had ever known. The letter was brief, direct, unapologetic. Japan was commanded to acknowledge Mongol supremacy, to enter into tributary relations, and to submit peacefully. Refusal would bring consequences. Across Asia, such letters had ended kingdoms. Most rulers understood what silence meant when it came from the Mongols. Cities that ignored Mongol demands did not merely fall, they were erased. Their populations slaughtered, their names reduced to ash and memory. Japan, however, responded in a way no one expected. It did not respond at all. No reply was sent. No emissary dispatched. No concession offered. The Kamakura shogunate chose silence. For 6 years, the Mongol court waited. And with each passing year, that silence transformed from diplomatic ambiguity into something far more dangerous. To the Mongols, silence was not neutrality. It was defiance. The Japanese ruling class did not fully grasp what they were challenging. Japan had known warfare for centuries, but its wars were internal, clan against clan, samurai against samurai, battles shaped by ritual, personal valor, and deeply embedded codes of conduct. The warrior elite lived by Bushido, the way of the warrior. Combat was personal. A samurai announced his lineage before battle, declaring his ancestry and deeds, inviting a worthy opponent to face him in honorable single combat. Victory was not merely about survival, it was about reputation, about how one would be remembered. The Mongols shared none of these values. Their empire had been forged in blood across the Eurasian steppe. They did not worship honor. They worshipped efficiency. Their armies were machines, disciplined, adaptable, ruthless. They fought as units, not individuals. They maneuvered as formations, not heroes. They valued victory above all else, and when necessary, they used terror as a weapon. In October 1274, the Mongol invasion fleet finally appeared off the coast of Tsushima. It was unlike anything the Japanese had ever witnessed. Hundreds of ships filled the sea, war junks, transport vessels, supply ships, crewed not only by Mongols, but by conscripted Chinese and Korean soldiers. The empire had mobilized its full maritime capacity. On board were archers trained to fire in volleys, shield-bearing infantry, spearmen, and engineers. And something else. Something that would change the nature of warfare forever. Gunpowder. The defenders of Tsushima numbered just 80 samurai, led by the island's governor, So Sukuni. There were local militia and peasants scattered across the island, but on the beaches, it was these 80 men who would meet the invasion head-on. They did not retreat into the hills. They did not hide behind walls. They rode down to the shore. Because that was what samurai did. As the Mongol ships approached, the samurai advanced according to tradition. They called out challenges. They announced their names. They waited for honorable replies. None came. Instead, the Mongols formed ranks. Then the arrows fell. Mongol archers fired not as individuals, but as a single organism. Dense clouds of arrows darkened the sky, crashing into the advancing samurai with devastating precision. These were not ceremonial exchanges. They were killing volleys. Worse still, many of the arrows were poisoned. Horses screamed. Men collapsed mid-charge. Armor that had been forged to withstand blades proved useless against saturation fire. And then came the explosions. Iron spheres, tetsuhou, were hurled into the Japanese lines. Inside them was gunpowder. When they detonated, they shattered flesh and bone, but more importantly, they shattered certainty. The sound alone was paralyzing, a thunderous crack unlike anything the samurai had ever heard. Not thunder, not fire, not nature. It was the sound of a new age being born. Samurai warfare depended on courage, discipline, and composure. The Mongols understood something the Japanese did not yet know. Fear could be engineered. Horses panicked at the explosions. Men froze, unable to process the chaos unfolding around them. The psychological shock was as lethal as the physical damage. When the Mongols advanced, they did so in groups. 10 against 1. No duels, no declarations, no mercy. A samurai isolated on the field was surrounded, pinned, and cut down in seconds. This was not battle as ritual. This was battle as extermination. Within less than 3 hours, the fight on Komoda Beach was over. Every one of the 80 samurai lay dead. Governor So Sukuni did not commit ritual suicide. He chose instead to ride directly into the enemy ranks, cutting down as many as he could before being overwhelmed. Tsushima had fallen. But for the Mongols, victory on the battlefield was only the first phase. The next phase was terror. Across the island, civilians were rounded up. Prisoners were mutilated, their hands pierced, ropes threaded through their wounds. They were tied to the sides of ships and displayed as living warnings. Heads were piled along the shore, not out of cruelty for cruelty's sake, but strategy. The Mongols believed fear traveled faster than armies. Every atrocity was a message intended for the next target. Aiki Island, Kyushu, mainland Japan. One Japanese warrior escaped the carnage and rode south to Kyushu, carrying news that would shake the shogunate to its core. He did not merely speak of numbers. He spoke of thunder weapons, of formations that ignored honor, of an enemy that could not be fought by tradition alone. Japan was no longer facing a familiar kind of war. It was facing annihilation. The first invasion ended not because the Mongols were defeated, but because the weather turned against them. Storms forced the fleet to withdraw temporarily, allowing Japan a brief, fragile reprieve. But no one believed the danger had passed, and they were right. 7 years later, in 1281, Kublai Khan returned. This time, he came with overwhelming force. Over 4,500 ships, an estimated 140,000 troops, the largest amphibious invasion the medieval world had ever seen. Japan scrambled to prepare. Stone walls were constructed along Hakata Bay. Samurai trained for mass defense rather than individual combat. Night raids were planned. Desperation replaced ritual. Still, it was not enough. The Mongols landed. Fighting raged for weeks. The defenders were pushed to their limits. And then, the sky changed. A massive typhoon struck the Mongol fleet. For 2 days, wind and waves obliterated ships anchored too close together. Vessels smashed into one another, split apart, or were driven onto rocks. Tens of thousands drowned. Survivors were stranded, starving, hunted down by Japanese forces. The invasion collapsed. To the Japanese, this was divine intervention. They called it Kamikaze, the divine wind. But history does not end with miracles. The cost of survival nearly broke Japan. The shogunate had no land or wealth to reward the warriors who fought. No conquered land, no tribute, no spoils of war. In the feudal system of medieval Japan, reward was not symbolic, it was material. Land grants sustained loyalty. Wealth reinforced hierarchy. Without them, the system frayed. The Kamakura shogunate faced a problem no previous government had encountered. How do you reward warriors for a defensive war? The answer, tragically, was that it could not. The massive stone walls built along Hakata Bay had drained the treasury. Mobilization had required unprecedented expenditures. Emergency logistics consumed what little surplus remained. Samurai who had fought for years returned home to find their sacrifices unrecognized. Discontent spread. Loyalty weakened. The very class that had saved Japan now began to undermine its political stability. Within decades, the Kamakura shogunate would fall. The Mongol invasions did not conquer Japan, but they destabilized it from within. And yet, culturally, something else was taking shape. A story. A story that transformed survival into destiny. The storms that destroyed the Mongol fleets were soon remembered not as meteorological events, but as divine intervention. They were named Kamikaze, divine wind. According to emerging narratives, the gods had risen to protect the sacred land of Japan from foreign defilement. The nation, it was said, had been spared not by strategy or endurance, but by favor. This belief carried power. It unified a wounded society. It justified suffering. It gave meaning to loss. But it also blurred reality. The truth was more complex. Japan had survived because it adapted, because it built defenses, because it harassed supply lines, because it endured long enough for logistics and weather to take their toll. The storm was decisive, but it was not destiny. Still, myths rarely survive by acknowledging nuance. They survive by offering certainty. And the certainty of Kamikaze would echo through Japanese history for centuries. For generations, The Mongol invasions were remembered as proof that Japan was unique, protected, chosen, inviolate. Foreign threats would come, and they would fail. For generations, the Mongol invasions were remembered as proof that Japan was unique, protected, chosen, inviolate. Foreign threats would come, and they would fail.